Hello! So today I would like to do a book review. This is the book The Wilderness Cure by Wilde. I came across this lady talking to promote her book on various videos on YouTube, my favourite source of information, and she sounded like a very interesting character. And the book is about her diary of a year during which she attempted to live entirely off wild or foraged food, which is an interesting concept because everybody says, oh, it's not possible to live entirely off nature. You can't live without cultivation and commerce and everything. What is there in the wild to live on? A few nuts and berries in the autumn? Nobody could live very long on that. Digging up roots. It's not even legal to dig up roots in this country, but what roots there are, they're tiny, skinny little things. Nothing like the, carrots and potatoes and things that we grow. And on top of this crazy woman decided to start her experiment in November. So she hadn't planned in advance. If you're trying to emulate ancient populations of hunter-gatherers who would roam through the landscape and intimately know where plants were to be found and what seasons to go where, the habits of the herd animals that they were chasing. If you just plonk somebody down in that world, they would not be able to survive because they wouldn't have this continuum within which ancient peoples would have been living. I mean, she had a kind of a foothold in the natural world because she's a herbalist and a forager already. She apparently lives on her own 4 acres. I am so jealous. And besides that, I guess there are other lands around where she lives that she can go and forage in. So she's got an extensive knowledge of the wild plants and where to find them at different seasons. And obviously she'd been doing that already. But to start in November, when you hadn't prepared yourself and built up stocks of the essential carbohydrates and things, I don't know, utter craziness. Anyway, she decided to do this and she set herself some ground rules. It was going to be as much as possible foraged food, but she realised, even though she had up until that point been moving towards vegetarianism, she couldn't really be a vegetarian living on leaves, basically. She would have to eat some meat as well. So she made a little mental deal with herself that she could eat meat as long as it was kind of foraged meat that she had got from hunters she happened to know, very luckily, in exchange for things that she could supply to them, like herbal remedies and bottles of rosehip syrup or whatever she made. And she could eat eggs, but only, obviously you can't go to nests of wild birds and take those eggs, but what she would do, she would take note of when the wild birds had laid eggs, and she would use the equivalent in domestic hen's eggs. So it was almost like foraging, but not, if you know what I mean. So she had these, and I think she also had some condiments that she'd made previously from rose hips and elderberries and stuff, and some preserved wild products which were preserved in olive oil, but she thought it would be okay to use the olive oil even though it wasn't something she'd foraged, because she was kind of foraging it from her cupboard. And you can't be completely purist about this anyway. It's ambitious enough what she was trying to do here. And so this book is a sort of a diary of her year and what she went out and found and gathered and brought home and what she cooked with it. And this is the most fascinating thing, is the huge variety of things that she found. Obviously she has that knowledge, but reading her book, and she's got a glossary in the back, a list of all the plants that she talks about and whether they're edible or medicinal or whatever, poisonous, 1 or 2 poisonous ones. So that's the fascinating thing, is that you can read this and you can think, well, I could go out and find that plant and become familiar with it, and then I too could do what she has done. What puzzled me was the main plant she seemed to survive on all winter was something she called pink purslane, which I've never heard of before. I looked it up on the internet, and it's a kind of a succulent. It's got pink stems and fleshy little oval leaves. But apparently it grows wild in West Lothian, where she was foraging mainly. And I've never seen it around here in Sussex. I think there's something called sea purslane as well, which possibly is available around here. I haven't walked on the seashore recently, but I could have a look. So, I mean, I can't imagine me attempting anything similar. I don't have the breadth of knowledge, but it's an inspiration in that I really want to be able to connect more with the natural world around me. And I feel like everybody who lives in cities and, consumes processed food packed in plastic from supermarkets, everybody's lost touch with where we came from. And we came from this intimate relationship with the natural world, and it supplied our sustenance. And I really don't feel that the kind of processed foods that we're eating now, what they call ultra processed, things that have come from a chemical factory basically, I don't think they're doing us any good. In fact, I think they're probably the reason why there's so many diseases, so many people dying of cancer, so many people getting obesity related issues. It's all interconnected. It's to do with being separated from our natural environment. So yeah, I think it's important for everybody to look into this in some way and just try and build up that connection again. There are people who call themselves preppers in America who lay in stores of things in case there's going to be a civil war, or I don't know what they're afraid of. Intercontinental nuclear war, more pandemics, governments getting out of control. And yeah, they lay in supplies of this, that and the other, guns, ammunition, barrels of flour, I don't know what. Are they actually looking at the wild world around them and thinking to themselves, if there were an emergency, one day I would have to learn to forage and hunt and get my food from somewhere other than my built-up stocks, because they're not going to last forever. We have pigeons on our roof. We got solar panels installed, and the pigeons immediately flocked in and made nests underneath the solar panels, and we got someone to come and put blockages around them so the pigeons couldn't get underneath the panels, but they still enjoy sitting on top and cooing away, stupid little things. And every time I hear them, I think, that's a food source up there on the roof, which I don't know how to access. And maybe the day will come when I wish I had found out how to access them. They grow fat on the neighbours' bird feeders. I don't know what it is with bird feeders. People are crazy. Maybe only 20 years ago, the accepted advice, the wisdom was, don't feed the birds except in winter. In the summertime, let them find their own food, otherwise they will become soft. But that's all gone by the board now, and everybody, my neighbours on both sides, have these blooming bird feeders, and the pigeons flock down and stuff themselves on peanuts and fat and what have you. The squirrel grabs it as well, and I find peanuts buried all over the garden that the squirrel's taken. It's crazy. So anyway, I diverge. This is, yes, it's a very fascinating book. Let me find some excerpts to read to you. Okay, here's a bit at random. Today is a weekday, and with 4 weeks to go until the winter solstice, it's dark in the mornings, so I don't have time to go for an early walk. I'm relying on the plants that I've picked this week in the afternoons to feed me. Breakfast is interesting. Usually I have a big stir-fry of organic vegetables, bought weekly in bulk from the local organic wholesaler, with nuts and any mushrooms that have been found in the last day or two. This morning I'm having a chunky salmon fished from the River Tay that I froze in the summer. Well, yeah, she also uses her freezer, which is not quite what the hunter-gatherers would have had access to, but who can blame her? I've also dug up some crispy white marsh woundwort tubers, now well scrubbed to remove the heavy West Lothian clay, and picked a few fresh common hogweed leaves. The first issue is cooking without butter or liberal amounts of oil. So I decided to bake the salmon on a bed of fresh yarrow leaves to stop it sticking to the pot. With tiny leaves reminiscent of ferns, yarrow tastes like a pungent, slightly bitter wild rosemary. I also cover the fish with a thick blanket of this wild herb, nature's tinfoil. It cooks perfectly, and the boiled marsh woundwort tubers are excellent. A 9-star dish. 10 stars would require the addition of some butter. So that's the kind of thing she does. Another thing she did was to have her gut microbiome analysed. She did it at the beginning, and then I think a quarter of the way through the year, and I think she must have done it again at the end, although she ceases to mention it. The only thing she says is that the microbiome had changed completely. There were completely different bacteria in it after she changed her diet onto this wild diet. And the other thing she said was that she lost a lot of weight, which is not surprising because she'd set herself this task that involved only wild foods in winter and deer meat, which would not have had a lot of fat on it at that time of year either. The problem with the idea of losing weight is that it becomes a kind of a goal, an obsession, and really living healthily and in tune with your gut microbiome and the natural world is not at all about watching your weight and trying to melt off the fat and cut the calories and all that sort of rubbish that we've had shoved down our throats for the last however many years. It's not about that. It's about feeling good in yourself, a sense of well-being, and eating natural foods rather than processed foods. And I think if you do that, then health will follow naturally. Anyway, it's been an inspiration reading this book, and I fully intend to enlarge my knowledge of plants that I can gather and add to my diet. Because who knows, I'm 70 now, I might live to be 80, I might live to be 90. My old mum was 97 when she died, and the last decade of her life she was pretty disabled, and her mind was gradually going, and it would be nice to think one could avoid that by eating the right things. And anyway, it's worth a try. So there we are. Anyway, yeah, do read this book, really interesting. The Wilderness Cure by Wilde. See you next time. Bye.